Good morning, world of YouTube. Really, I don't have a lot going on today. Got to work, which, yeah, I like my job. Tattooing ain't bad, you know. I get to kind of pick and choose what I want to do. Customer's rude, I can tell them to go, like, F off. Other than that, it's pretty cool, because I'm always working inside. It, like, no heat, no cold. So that's a big plus. So at least have a job I like. But anyway, I've seen a few people ask, what was my first system? And my basshead journey started a long time ago. Probably when I was like 14. My cousin came over one day, and at that point I had never heard a subwoofer in my life. And actually they pretty much just like started putting them in cars. And I know in our area, he was like the first person ever in our whole area to have them. But I remember hearing him coming down the driveway like boom, boom. Like, what the heck is that? I went outside and checked his car out. And they had no idea what they were doing putting subwoofers in a car back then. You know, it dawned on me now, but back then it was like amazing. They took his whole back seat out and made a bench that you could actually sit on. It was carpeted and everything. And the subwoofers were kind of just like mounted in that you lean up against with grills on them. And it was like an infinite baffle setup. So they were like using the motors of the subs went in the trunk. Remember, he had a Punch 75 and like an Alpine amp on his 6x9s and door speakers. But I was hooked. At that point, I was hooked on subwoofers. So when I got my first car and got a system in it, I had a Sanyo amp, 4-channel. It was 50 by 2 and either 20 by 2 or 25 by 2. I'm still looking for one of these amps to this day. It was decent sized black Sanyo amp. And believe it or not, thinking back on it, the thing did like rated power or more. But I had bought that to run my whole system off of, and it did. And there was a brand called Targa. And this would have been late 80s, early 90s. And I had 2 of their tins behind the back seat of a 78 Olds Cutlass. I did pretty much a similar infinite baffle setup. And months later, I had actually built a box. Had no clue what I was doing, guys. Oh my God, my first adventure with car audio was terrible. Like, I had no idea at all what I was doing. And then for systems after that, I wasn't building boxes, buying prefabbed or boxes from other people. And then I actually learned how to figure airspace and all this stuff in port area. And believe it or not, I learned that from a pamphlet that came with an MTX subwoofer. It had a diagram in there on how to figure out airspace and calculate it. So a number that ever, like, basshead that builds boxes should know by heart is 1728. But I learned how to do that from that MTX pamphlet. And port calculation, that took me a little while to figure out, you know, like to figure out the actual length of a port for tuning. But after building my first decent box like that, I had met a guy named Joe Klein that was working at, God, I think it was an American Superstore, and he was the installer. And this dude was like a car audio guru. I would talk to this guy and watch what this guy did, and he was real knowledgeable. And I started building good enclosures after I met him. Just from talking to him, watching what he did. He was doing like breaking edge stuff way back in the early, oh no, it would have been the later part of the 90s that I seen him do like really crazy stuff. Like on one of his builds, he went out and bought a bunch of 8 volt, like lawnmower style batteries. And he was wiring pairs of them in a series to get a true 16 volt. Because this was a time you really couldn't get lithium, and I don't think anybody was making 16 volt batteries. So I was watching him do this, man, and I was just kind of like amazed at the knowledge this guy had on doing stuff. But I learned a whole lot from him, and that's kind of what just led me into where I'm at now. But yeah, my first system, it was terrible. It was a crappy install. God, I was buying like, I believe it was probably 10 or 12 gauge rows of wire at AutoZone to run from my front battery to the back. Running everything off one battery, stock alternator. It was terrible. I had multiple systems back in the day, but like I said, none of it was ever any good. None of it was loud, really. I mean, I thought it was loud. My first system, I thought that shit was so loud. I mean, I was driving around everywhere beating. And back in retrospect, it's like, no, it wasn't that really loud at all. But I was happy with it, you know. I could sit like a soda can on the roof of the car and it would kind of spin when the bass was beating. That's about it. It wasn't knocking the windshield wipers off the windshield or anything. Never had to worry about like shattering a window. That's for dang sure. Just, it is what it is. But you know, that's where my journey started. From the day I heard my cousin pull in, I was hooked. And I competed back in 2007, like almost the whole year of '07. I had a little CRX with 410s. Y'all gonna hate on me too, because they were kicker comp VRs. And I had a CRX, and I had built a few boxes for that car. And I had like a 2,000 watt Brutus in there, Hyphonics Brutus, and that was a decent amp back in '07, believe it or not. But I had blown it, and a car audio shop in Sikeston, Missouri, I had went to a couple shows they had going on, and the guy really liked me and the knowledge that I had and how loud the little car was. So he had heard I blew my amp, and there was another comp coming up. I wasn't going to have my amp repaired in time, so he loaned me 2 Fusion amps, and they were rated at like 2,500 each at 1 ohm. And I basically put 2 tins on each one, and it was wired down to a half. Each amp was at a half. I don't think that Fusion amp was putting out the power my Brutus did, but I did a 149.7 on Term Lab in that little car in the kick. And I believe it was 61 hertz, but I met some guys there, and there was they all had CRXs, and they were on a team called Team Sweep. And I talked to a few of these guys, and you know, we started chatting back and forth after that comp, and they helped me design a little box. Man, it was small, and I was using the arrow port sticking out of the box. And we put the car on Term Lab and just kept testing port length until I got to that 61 hertz frequency where it peaked really good in the car. And I wound up doing like a 153 on Term Lab with that car, and it had kicker comp VRs in it. And that was a big accomplishment, because that was loud in 2007. That's when the Term Lab like got introduced at most comps, and guys that were doing high 50s were doing low 40s after the introduction of that Term Lab. So I was really proud of what I accomplished back then. I mean, I got that little car loud, but it was shitty on music. I actually had to take my really short port tubes out and put longer ones in to play music, and it still wasn't like great sounding to like cruise around and play music with, because the car peaked so high. But I kind of got out of it, you know. I got a different car, and things kind of halted until I built this thing, and now I'm pretty back in car audio, pretty hardcore. I'm having fun with it, you know, going to shows, meeting people. It's what it's all about, you know, kind of a big basshead family. But anyway, don't want to ramble on too much. That's how I got my start. Throw some comments on what your first system was, or how you got started in this hobby that we all love. All right, everybody, have a great day. Peace out, and as always, bass on, guys.